If you try to decide between a Lumix S1II and a Nikon ZR, stop scrolling, because after testing them side by side, what shocked me wasn't which camera won, it was how wide the gap became once we stepped into real shooting workflow. I shoot Lumix cameras all the time, so this wasn't about switching systems. I wanted to see just how well the Nikon ZR could fit into my personal workflow. If you enjoy real-world camera tests like this, hit the subscribe button, and I've linked both cameras below if you want to check out current pricing. Now, by the end of this video, you know exactly which camera fits your style of shooting, and more importantly, which one might slow you down. Now, I don't own the Nikon ZR, so I reached out to K24 Tech and we linked her to properly test it against the Lumix S1 Mark II. The first time we shot this test, it wasn't usable. Different lenses, different variables, and that's not how you judge image quality. In fact, I tested with my S1R Mark II. So we ran it back again, same lens on both cameras, the Dizio 35mm Vespi 2 at T2 and T4. Most of the footage you see is from T2. Match settings, base ISO 800 on the ZR, base ISO 1000 on the S1II, Kelvin locked at 5000, same ND filters. That is about how accurate we could get both cameras to be. We also tested across serious recording formats. On the Nikon ZR, Red RAW, End RAW and ProRes RAW. On the Lumix S1II, B RAW and ProRes RAW. No lab tests, real shooting conditions. Alright, enough talking, let's look at the footage. First real difference showed up immediately. Both cameras are set to base ISO with identical lighting and a simple color space transform in Resolve. No LUTs, no heavy grading. The Lumix delivers warmer, more neutral skin tone straight out of the camera, the kind of image that needs very little correction. The Nikon ZR, on the other hand, leans cooler with a noticeable green bias. Some people may like that, but not me. That's an extra step I feel in post. I don't want to put that on every of my projects. On paper, both cameras use very similar partially stacked full frame sensors rated at over 15 stops of dynamic range. But numbers only matter if they show up in the image. If you look at the sky behind me here, notice the texture in the brighter areas, how the highlights roll off. S1II holds onto that very detail just a little more gracefully. In my opinion, it's not a massive difference, but it's visible, and small differences do add up fast in post. Now this is where the workflow began separating the two cameras. In Red RAW, the Nikon looks fantastic, exactly what you expect from a codec trusted across the industry. But once you step down into End RAW, ProRes RAW or H.265, which I didn't even bother testing because of the noise floor, especially in the shadows across multiple clips, the Lumix consistently produce cleaner shadows with more usable latitude. YouTube compression may hide some of this, but inside DaVinci Resolve, it's very clear. Based on what you've seen so far, which way are you leaning, Team Lumix or Team Nikon? Let me know in the comment section. And now to the part that spec sheets will never tell you, exposure tools. I can adapt to menus, I can adapt to ergonomics, or I cannot compromise on exposure. The Nikon gives you a histogram and meter, but no false color. Meanwhile, the Lumix gives you false color and a luminance spot metering, in addition to the previous mention. Combine those tools, you nail exposure almost every time. Yeah, I've heard about a guy who's created a false color LUT for the Nikon ZR, but it's not as good, or it's not going to come as close as if Nikon had implemented that in that massive 4-inch screen. So this is where Lumix clearly understands working shooters. And obviously, if you shoot handheld, this matters more than people admit. The S1II delivers up to 8 stops of stabilization. The ZR gives you around 5. But if you have it in a tripod, that wouldn't matter much. But for documentaries, run and gun, or solo shooting, that gap is the difference between usable footage and fixing it in post. So what me and K24 Tech did was, we had the ZR and my Lumix S1II, R2, in the first time instance we made, and we tested stabilization, and clearly Lumix obviously outclass the Nikon ZR. Quick note before we move on, for this test, we use the Dizio Vespi 2 lenses. We use a 35mm, a T2 and a T4 like I earlier mentioned. They're fantastic pieces of lenses, but not everyone wants to spend that kind of money on cinema glass. So if you're looking for a more affordable alternative, you should look at the Typoxy Mirror C lenses. I've got a 35 here on my S1R Mark II. I also have, what's this one? This is 75mm T1.5. I've done a review on these lenses. I'll leave a link down in the description or up here so you guys check it out. These lenses are, I think, the best cinema lenses for mirrorless cameras because of how small they are. I couldn't use this in the test I did with K24 Tech because he didn't have an M to Z mount adapter. Currently, I have an M to L mount adapter, and I kid you not, this thing is so easy to use. And I think that the future away from PL mount lenses. Here's where the Nikon ZR makes a serious statement. Internal red RAW, yes. No external recorder, yes. Straight to CF Express card, yes. For narrative work, commercials or control productions, that is a big deal. But the S1II can record ProRes RAW internally, but Blackmagic RAW required to use a Blackmagic Video Assist. However, and this is important, the massive file sizes that come with Red RAW, which is the best codec out of the Nikon ZR. I don't think any other codec makes a lot of sense. K24 Tech already complained to me about storage after the shoot we had. I thought we had about 500 gigs of footage recorded, and I reached out to him. I was like, did we have 500 gig? And it was like, no, a massive 780 gig of files. I thought we were capped at 500 gigs. So yes, the capability is incredible, and I've not even gone deep into how you compare the H.265 in the Lumix cameras with the number of codecs they give you, and they still held up very well, even if shooting in MP4. So ask yourself honestly, will you actually be using Red RAW all the time? And even using Red RAW with other codecs be useful? Or are you just about specs that look better than what actually fits your reality? Also, the S1II just feels right in hand. Balanced, secure, purposeful. The ZR, yes, is lighter, which sounds great until you mount heavier cinema glass on it. Then balance shifts forward and start adjusting your grip more often than you want to. Might not be a deal breaker for some people, but for me, it clearly is. Even when you have a cage on it, it doesn't really feel complete. It tries, but not as much as gripping S1. Well, this is S1R2, but the S1II, which I need to record this episode, by the way. So here's the truth. Neither of these cameras produces a bad image, not even close, but they feel very different to shoot with. The Nikon ZR is a high capability camera that demands more from you. More storage, more color work, more noise management. If you're shooting narrative projects and building a raw, heavy workflow, those trade-offs might make sense. But for me, the Lumix S1 Mark II is the way to go. Cleaner files across codecs, color that needs less correction, exposure tools that help me nail shots in camera, and stabilization for days that make handheld work reliable. When you're working fast, consistency beats the hype. Choose based on the kind of shooter you are, not the spec sheet that impressed you the most. Now, if this video helped you make a clear decision, hit the like and subscribe button. Links to both cameras are below, and let me know in the comments, are you Team Nikon or Team Lumix? What matters most in your workflow? It's a Filmmaker. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one. God bless and peace.